We're now going to take a look at class flag quiz games submitGuess method and also disableButtons method as well. Now the submitGuess method that you see on the screen here is called when the user clicks any one of the answer buttons, and as you'll see, as you already saw, each of the buttons is registered to use the same event listener, and at the end of the source code we'll see the actual implementation of that event listener simply calls submitGuess and passes in the button that the user touched. And the reason that's important is because that button's name is the country name that the user is guessing, and we need to use that to determine which guess the user made. So submitGuess receives the button, and here at line 253 we get the guess button's text by calling getText, and getText, as you can see here if I hover over it for a moment, returns a char sequence, not a string. So we want to be able to compare the guess button's string with the correct answer, and for that reason we call toString on the char sequence that's returned by getText. The next thing we do is get the country name for the correct answer so that we can compare that to the guess, and we increment total guesses because if submitGuess got called, that means there was another guess and we want to keep track of that. Now if the guess equals the answer, then we have a correct answer, at which point we'll increment correct answers. We will say that the answer was correct by displaying that item on the answer text view followed by an exclamation point, and we also change the color of that item as well. And notice what we're doing here, we're setting the text color to a resource that's returned by this highlighted part where we get our resources object. We get a color resource called r.color.correctAnswer, which is the green color in our app, and we display the correct answer on the screen. We also call disableButtons, which we'll look at momentarily, to disable all the other buttons so that until the next flag gets displayed, the user can't touch those buttons to cause additional events. Now, because it's a correct answer, we also need to check if the number of correct answers is equal to 10, in which case that also means that the game is over. So for that case, we will display or create and then display an alert dialog, and we use the alert dialog builder class to help us create that. So we create a new alert dialog builder. We set the title on the dialog using one of our string resources. And then we set the message within the dialog, and we're using some string formatting to display the value of total guesses, to display the string that represents the word guesses. We calculate the percentage correct, and we display that over here. And then finally, we also display a string, which is the string correct, represented by this resource r.string.correct. We set the dialog so that it's not cancelable. That means the user cannot cancel this dialog by hitting the back button on the device. They can hit the reset button, which is the button that we create down here that will start another quiz. And of course, if they don't want to do the quiz, they can always hit the home button on the device to leave the app altogether. Now at line 286 we set the positive button with a title for the button or a text for the button, which is our string resource called reset quiz. We also create an on-click listener for that button that says when the button is touched, we should call reset quiz, which will start the next quiz. And of course, as you saw previously, that will then pick 10 new flags for the next quiz. At line 297, we use builder.create to create the alert dialog object, and then we call its show method to display it on the screen. And it turns out that you don't actually need both of these statements to display the dialog. Rather than calling create on the builder, you can actually just call show directly on that builder object and eliminate the additional statement that we have here. Now, if the number of correct answers is not yet equal to 10, then in our else part, we will post delayed a runnable object which is going to cause the next flag to be loaded. So here we're using our handler object, and again, if I hover over handler, you can see that it is a handler object defined in our flag quiz game class. And the handler class is provided by Android. It allows you to execute a runnable at some point, whether it be immediately or at some point in the future. The post delayed method says I want to execute a runnable at some point in the future in milliseconds. So what I've done here is I've given it as the first argument an anonymous inner class that implements interface runnable. All I need to define in a runnable is a run method that says what to do when the runnable executes, and load next flag is the task I would like to perform at a delayed point in the future. The delay is 1000 in this case, which means I want to execute load next flag 1 second into the future. Now, if the original guess was incorrect, we have this last else part of our initial if statement, and in this case we're going to start the flag shake animation. So we tell the flag image view that we want to start an animation on that image view, and the animation we want to start is the shake animation that we loaded back in on create. We also set the answer text view's text to the incorrect answer string. We set the color of that to the incorrect answer color, which is red, and then we set the particular button that the user already touched. We set its enabled value to false, meaning disable that button so the user cannot make that same selection again. Now, once we disable all the buttons for a correct answer, or when we need to disable them, I should say, the disableButtons method got called from the previous method in our code, and all we do is walk through our button table layout, get the number of children, which is the number of rows. For each of those rows, we get the particular row, and then get the children within the row, and individually we set each one with the set enabled method with the value false, which disables all those buttons. So we simply walk our way through all the guesses, make sure that they're all disabled. That way, once a correct guess has been made, all the buttons on the user interface are disabled, and we now wait for the next flag to be displayed.